sorry now that I'm a little late. I apologize that you had to wait. It totally slipped my mind. I lost all my sense of time. So buy me that drink and just let me think, and I'll tell you the reasons why. My alibi.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Alibi the podcast, an initiative started by Gagasan Mahasiswa Undang-Undang Sabah, GUNS for short. I'm your host, Geoffery. Joining me today are Dylan, Elaine, Granville, and a very, very special guest. He is the Member of Parliament for the District of Penampang P.174. He is also the Deputy President to Parti Warisan, former Minister of International Trade and Industry. He is none other than YB Datuk Darell Leiking. Today, we're going to be talking about the Malaysian Agreement 1963. But before we go into that, let's just have a little introductory session. So I'll go first. So my name is Geoffery. I am a second-year law student studying in Help University, Damansara. I am a member of GUNS and also a very proud Sabahan. A fact that no one knows about me, I am good at sewing. What about you, Datuk?
It's Darrell, not Darrell.
Darrell, why don't you tell the audience a little about yourself?
Okay, great that you're good at sewing. That saves a lot of money when you want to design your clothing. I'm horrible at sewing. I can't put the needle, the thread on the needle. So, anyways, I am not really good at anything. I think I learn just like all of you guys. As we go on, we find our interests and we try to be, a little bit of a master, but of none for now. But a little bit of skills that I have basically on computing. For some reason, I fell in love with it when I was young, but I never really, the science of it, I did not get into. But there's so many things that you guys have right before your hands today. Look at each one of you all having phones. Can you imagine during our time, we had to use the public phone? Dylan's father would know. So there are a lot of skills that you guys have, and I guess we are very privileged today to learn all these skills from the YouTube. Probably, Geoffery, if I try, I might be able to even learn sewing through YouTube.
No, it's quite, for me, it's because my dad sells sewing machines and I kind of learned it through him. So it's relatively easy for me, I guess.
Okay, so that skill, that was brought down from your father to you. The
Yes,
apple does not
exactly.
follow. The apple does not fall far away from the tree.
Exactly. Very, very fortunate
Okay.
to be able to.
Very fortunate. Very good for you.
Dylan, what about you?
Okay, hello all. And once again, a special thank you, Darrell, for making your time to be with us. I'm Dylan, a postgraduate student currently doing my LLM and bar course at the University of Northumbria. But of course, currently I'm doing this remotely at home, in KK. A fun fact about myself is that I have a hobby for arts and crafts. I love to paint and draw when I'm not occupied. Aside that, I am a big movie buff. I love watching movies, such as Marvel movies in particular. I find movie plots a very interesting way to become inspired and to learn valuable lessons of human ability to become heroes of their own story. So I do hope that I am able to utilize what I can to help Sabah one day, as I believe discussions such as these can enable us to explore a solution and then unpack them together to make a difference. Yeah.
What about you, Elaine?
So, hi everyone. My name is Elaine, and I'm going to my final year of law school at BAC. So, one fact about me is I really love to dance. So, ever since I was 4 years old, my parents sent me to ballet school, and usually there's a thing where a lot of people actually quit as they grow up, but I actually really loved it lah. So I actually stayed on until I grew up, and I also met a lot of friends. I met my best friend through ballet, and it's something I really hold like close to me. Although I haven't, dabbled into dancing in a while because it's like COVID and everything. It's quite inconvenient. But yeah, I would say I really truly love dancing. And it's a good way to keep fit as well.
But we didn't ask Granville what he does.
Okay.
My name is Granville. I'm currently reading law at MMU Malacca. So
Okay.
So a little fun fact about me: I can converse in various languages such as English, Malay, Mandarin. I can understand Hakka, but sadly I don't know how to actually converse in Hakka. And also sadly, although I'm a Sino Kadazan, but I don't know Kadazan that well, the Kadazan language that well. So it's a very sad thing. But I hope I get to learn lah in years to come.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. You should. You should.
I will.
I'm actually taking classes on YouTube if you want to join me.
Okay.
Skill share.
Classes. Share. All right. So moving on, the second part of the ice breaking. Okay, this is the question of the hour. Why did you decide to go to law school? Darrell, would you like to go first?
To law school.
Yes.
Honestly, I wanted to be a pilot, but somehow I did not get the right encouragement. So I ended up doing law, and I read law, and I found it to be something that was good, and it fit me. And of course, I did not plan to practice, but situation called for me to practice eventually. So right after my bar school, when I was admitted to Lincoln's Inn, I started my chambering under a very good people master. He was a bit disappointed at the end because he trained me very well on litigation, but at the end of the day, I went into conveyancing. So there, I guess I found my calling in conveyancing. So that was since I opened up my firm in 97. I was called in 96. So some of you all were not born yet. So I think you were all not born yet.
I wasn't also.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. And I think the law profession is one of the best profession you can have because it's so, you can be anyone you want with that background. It's so amazing to do law, and at the same time, you can also move on to some other things, and I think people who go into law and really practice it, they'll find it to be something that, how do you say that, that will fit what they can do in their lives throughout the route or journey of their practice. Yeah, so it's good that you guys chose law. It's a very honorable profession, but of course we do come across some circumstance where business comes into play and law becomes challenging because there's a lot of legal firms in Sabah. As you can see, there will be a lot of issues when it comes to practice. We just had a very unfortunate incident in Sarawak where a lawyer had committed suicide. We don't know the facts, but we hope that such incidents will not occur again because some people speculate that it may have something to do with mental depression. Of course, coupled up with all the factors today with the COVID situation, the business, and of course, the challenges, personal life as well. We have to find some sort of a focal point that when you do law, you focus on something you love. And because it's so, it's an incredible profession. You can go into many things. I chose politics after almost 20 years in practice. About 18 years to 19 years in practice. So I chose politics and I found it to be something that I like.
Was politics something you always intended to do, Darrell?
I don't know. Sometimes you find a moment in your life where you think you can do something, and I'm not really satisfied with what I've achieved. But you feel that you were able to contribute a little bit. And some people will never really see what you've done, but as long as you know that you have not compromised your ethics, you've not compromised more so the course and journey that you want to do as a politician, that you will just stand tall and not be afraid of any other accusation that people makes on you. Yeah. So I guess it was a calling that came midway along my legal practice.
What motivated you to go into politics?
It's easy to say that you want to do something that is extraordinary, but really when you go into politics, the journey is not as simple as some have been fortunate to have. There's a lot of hurdles along your way, and I guess what motivated me were issues that became apparent to me when it came to Sabah. It's cliche to say that, but it became apparent to me that there were a lot of things that I felt our politicians, more so in the mainstream government, could have done. And I wanted to be as much part of it as everybody else. And unfortunately, in 2013, when I won the parliamentary seat, I was in the opposition. Now, why I say unfortunate is all the plans that you had personally on what you can do for Sabah were limited to an opposition field. If you were government, it would be different. That is the experience I had in 2018 towards my second term. When I went into government, there were a lot of things that we did, and I believe the accumulation of it is being felt today. I was fortunate to be put under MITI, although it was not the ideal place to achieve what I thought in relation to your subject, Malaysia Agreement 1963. I had a little bit of it through the Jawatan Kuasa MA63 or the MA63 committee, headed by, of course, the Secretariat, the late V.K. Liu, who is a lawyer as well, the former Member of Parliament of Batu Sapi. And he did a lot of things on MA63, and which was a subject that I was very inclined to. But I was tasked to do something else, which I hope you guys will try to find out more about MITI. MITI is the gateway to all investment into the country. So when you bring in investment, it turns out to be a generating machine for money for the country, which eventually goes to the Ministry of Finance, and where Ministry of Finance will send all these monies and accumulated investment into respective ministries. So I'd like to say that MITI is the main entry and gateway to the country, with investment, with many other ways. And as you can see today, the senior minister, number one, is MITI, Azmin Ali. Right. And a lot of our people did not really understand why MITI is so important in the whole structure of the government. And find out more about what MITI can do. And I'm proud to say that during my time, I was able to bring a little bit for Sabah. And in comparison, I just want to share with you, between 2013 to 2018, the previous regime, Barisan Nasional, approved 9.7 billion only to Sabah. That was through MITI, 9.7 billion. Sounds a lot. But when you compare it to the same period, 2013 to 2018, through the same government, Sarawak had 54.2 billion. So just imagine the disparity. Now, in a little way, I thought the best way to do this, and I had to accept the task I was given, was to narratize and change the way we distribute investment into the country. So I'm proud to say that we were able to bring, as a team, throughout our 18 months. I was only appointed in July 2018, and I was able to do what I think I did my best within that 18 months, to bring 18.1 billion approval to Sabah.
Dylan, why did you decide to go to law school?
I didn't envision myself becoming a lawyer or anything like that straight away. But I think, like many law students, I saw the versatility of a law degree. So in the beginning, in high school and college, I knew my weaknesses. I knew that I wasn't good in science or math, but I knew my strength was probably my language subject. So as cliche as it sounds, I knew I wanted to choose a career path also that will enable me to make an impact, whether it is small or big. or make a difference. And I thought, okay, naturally, a law degree can tick those boxes. I can use communication and language to, to advocate or make change in a certain way. Also, I think in the plus side, I thought a law degree would probably develop skills in confidence or like advocacy, to understand different laws in my country. I feel like that is a power that should be, very important to us. I mean, you have the power to make change. So I think with a law degree, not only do you know your rights, where you are, but also you have the knowledge to help people realize this right. So I think that was my main reasoning to choose a law degree.
Elaine, what about you?
I don't have any special reasons, honestly. I was one of those students who, in the beginning, I started out in science stream, and I've always pictured myself, continuing in that stream. But in A levels, I agreed to try out law because my parents encouraged me to try it after they said I talk too much. Yeah, they were like, "Oh, you should try law." And I was like, "Okay." Yeah, so yeah, and after A levels, when I graduated, I still wasn't very sure on what exactly I wanted to pursue. And so I thought, okay, since I already took law, and I thought it was quite interesting, and like both Daryl and Dylan has mentioned, it's very flexible, it's very versatile. So I thought,
It's
yeah,
versatile.
yeah, exactly. So I thought, okay, I decided to go for it. And so I'm going to my final year and going to graduate soon. I'm still waiting for my
Ooh,
calling,
good luck.
I would say. I'm still waiting to, to realize what specific area that I am very interested in, that I would thrive in. But overall, I'm definitely excited to see, how I can put this degree to good use, be it the legal field or like any other interrelated fields lah.
What about you, Granville?
Yeah. So the reason why I entered into law school is because law and policy making is sort of intertwined with each other.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I fancied the idea of becoming a policy maker. I think when I was in Form 2, Form 3, when I was exposed to the world of politics. And that is also the first time I was introduced to, or I get to know Mr. Darrell through, his posters by the Jalan Raya. And growing up, I see policy making can be part of my life because I'm inspired by prominent individuals like the late Lee Kuan Yew, the late Karpal Singh, who was also a law student and also
Lawyers.
a lawyer. Yeah, subsequently they became policy makers and also politicians. So yeah, that's the reason why I decided to enter into law school.
For me, I decided to go to law school mainly because in high school I was good at debating and also public speaking. So I thought to myself, since I enjoyed these activities, why not put them to good use by being maybe a future barrister if God allows me. That's me.
I'm sure you will. Thank
you very much. All right, so diving into the topic for today, Malaysian Agreement, or the agreement relating to Malaysia between the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore, was the agreement which combined North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore with the existing states of Federations of Malaya, the resulting union being named Malaysia. Singapore was later expelled from Malaysia, becoming an independent on 9th August 1965. Daryl, why do you think MA63 is important to us Malaysians and specifically to us as Sabahans?
The Malaysian Agreement 1963 is an international treaty, recognized as an international treaty, and it's like a birth certificate of the nation. Okay? Without which, if not for all four nations at that time, we would not have been able to form the federation. I have to admit, even myself I was not aware of it much. I've only heard of it when I first started my legal practice. And it was not much of an interest in the beginning because I thought it was more polemic at the time. But as you go on throughout your journey in your career, you start to understand and embrace what the Malaysia Agreement is all about. So as a birth certificate of the nation, it actually described at least your genome. It described all your identity. It described of what you are and what you should be. So when I look at the Malaysia Agreement 1963, you have to read it together with the IGC report. You also have to read it together with the Malaysia Act and all the other acts that were, and also statutes as well as policies that were decided prior to the formation of the Federation. So you would have assumed that a lot of things were perfect or doing well. But as we went on, new people or new intellects or new persons started inquiring more and more as to whether the formation was right, whether the formation had actually achieved its intention. Now, I can't dwell into the real intention of those who were part of the negotiation then. But we saw, after reading through the Act and some of the reports and the IGC itself, you began to see that the makeup of the nation was not right. A lot of things became assimilated centrally to the federal government. The intention, I guess, and I mean, it's legal as well, was to manage the country, manage the federation equally between the remaining state. In this case, Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, which became Sabah, and of course Sarawak, after the expulsion of Singapore in 1965. So what I saw throughout those times were everything was centralized to Peninsula or at least to the federal government. Now, I think you all have read all the texts, all the comments, articles, as well as what Malaysia Agreement 1963 were all about. I would look at it fast forward to when I became government. The then Chief Minister formed the committee immediately as soon as we were in the cabinet. And we tasked the late Vic Liu to do it, and it was formed. The late Vic Liu, through his task force, were able to identify 21 issues that had been assimilated federally, that became federal, and where we've lost. So among others, these 21 issues, 17 of which were resolved during our time in government. And this included the rights over the deep sea fishing, the rights over the environment, and what have you. These were not really the major ones, but I urge you to read what the 17 were, right? But the 4 remaining ones, which we could not complete because we had a lot of resistance from the civil service, also from some of those people who have relation to this, like Petronas and what have you. We were caught up during the change of government in March 2020, the Sheraton move. So there were 4 more issues that could not complete the puzzle, the 21 issues which the late Vic Liu identified. Had we complete the 21 issues, it would have been a puzzle that would have drawn a picture. With that picture, we can then amend the federal constitution, repeal certain acts, and amend some of the existing laws as well as fiscal management of the country. Now, what are these 4? The 4 would have changed the dynamics of the country, as well as it would have completed what the intent of the forefathers when they formed the federation. Now, these 4 are the Territorial Sea Act 2012, the Continental Shelf Act, the ownership over our hydrocarbon, as well as the quantum of what was agreed in 1974, re the cash payment, which some of us maybe, without legal how do you call that, certainty, we call it royalty. It's actually cash payment, okay? Through the Petroleum Development Act 1974. So these 4 relates to fiscal, huge fiscal control over our continental shelf, our management of our wealth and assets and minerals. So I think during the formation of Malaysia, it was always agreed that the way we manage our country, the way we manage the federation were on an equal basis, as well as on equal fiscal rights and control in our own respective Sabah, Sarawak, as well as Peninsula. Now, read more about the remaining 4 and why it's important. The Malaysia Agreement 1963 would not be performed if not all 21 issues were solved first. So someone will say, hey, Daryl, you're talking nonsense. There's Article 8 of MA63. Now, Article 8 says if there are a lot of terms, if the terms of the Malaysian Agreement 1963 are not performed, you can then enforce that term. But how do you enforce the term if throughout the fraction of time, from 1963 right up to now, all these laws have become convoluted and have become federalized? Even though the MA63, the IGC report says this is how we must manage our federation, all this became assimilated federally. So you need to amend the federal constitution. You need to amend certain laws and, in fact, repeal some laws. So I give you this. The Territorial Sea Act 2012. Why is that so important? In 1969, right up to 2011, the emergency ordinance was in effect in our nation, in our federation. 1969, they called it the emergency ordinance to manage the racial disputes between certain races or certain Malaysians. The 1974 emergency ordinance added something else. Now, coincidentally, in 1974, the Petroleum Development Act 1974 was enacted. And that actually vested all our hydrocarbon, oil and gas, to Petronas, vested it. But what I realized, and this is my legal opinion, what I realized was, albeit that it was vested to Petronas, the rights over the continental shelf, the benua, they call it in Bahasa Malaysia, the seabed, still belong to the state, because those are our boundaries, those are our lands, right up to 200 nautical miles, our which they call the economic zone, So exclusive economic zone, EEZ. Now, what does the benua or what does the continental shelf have, or the seabed have? These are all these are all the marine life that we have, including digging into that hole on the seabed and taking away the carbon, the hydrocarbon, oil and gas. Now, we've vested it to Petronas in 1974. So, legally speaking, any commercialization or any activity on our seabed, the continental shelf, should be licensed by the state. In our case, Sabah, in Sarawak's case as well, and Kelantan, Terengganu, which are all oil and gas producing state. So what happened there was they used the emergency ordinance to take away that right and put it under the Majlis Keselamatan Negara, under the Prime Minister's office, where but for the emergency ordinance, all this licensing, all these approvals, all the rights to touch our seabed would have been the state decision, as opposed to the National Emergency Committee or something like that, or NOC or Majlis Keselamatan Negara. So we did not realize this until 2011, when Najib, who was then the Prime Minister, lifted, if you can recall, the ISA, as well as the emergency ordinance of 69 and 74. It's kind of strange. But because our government, from end to end, always thought that these were all federal decisions or only to be decided by the federal government, we assumed that we were not part, or we did not have any part in controlling those rights. Because when you have no knowledge of it or experience of it, you would assume the military, the naval bases or the naval ships and what have you, had rights over it, and the federal government had rights over it because they gave us security. But security is a federal obligation. However, managing, controlling, and deciding on our seabed, our continental shelf, should us. So when Najib lifted it in Parliament in 2011, someone must have advised him. They said, I think what we did was the boo-boo. Because if the state starts realizing it, they will start controlling the continental shelf because it's legally theirs, constitutionally and legally ours. So they created the Territorial Sea Act 2012, where a lot of our members of parliament gave an A and supported it, and it was enacted. Why? What did the Territorial Sea Act do? It, in effect, gave what the federal had during the emergency ordinance from 69 to 2011, the same rights, but now it became statute. So when it becomes statute, it changes our boundaries. So when you change the boundaries, right, we lose our land, we lose our seabed. That is why the Territorial Sea Act is not a good act for us. However, and somehow the people or the draftsmen who drew the federal constitution, the Federation of Malaysia constitution, actually put a protection on us. I think it is Article 1 sub 3 of the federal constitution, where any changes to the boundary of any state needs to be ratified by the state assembly. Luckily for us, the Territorial Sea Act has yet to be rejected by the state, nor accepted by the state. Now, this is something interesting. Now, what has it got to do with the Malaysia Agreement 1963? In the overall of the MA63, all these rights were inherent to us, legally and also inherent to us. But had we ratified the Territorial Sea Act, that would have given away our boundaries. We would have reduced our landmass, and we would have lost control over the most expensive, the most lucrative of our assets, our mineral assets, which is the control of our seabed, which, among others, like I said, 17 issues out of 21 which VK Liu identified included deep sea diving, included deep sea fishing. So that is why we must take back control of the continental shelf, as well as repeal the Territorial Sea Act. The MA63 would have never, ever envisioned that we give it away. So how do we bring back the MA63? It exists, it is there, it is our birth certificate, but if we do not fix the problems caused or the losses that we had through giving it to federal, centralizing it to federal, that birth certificate becomes defective. I mean, I'm trying to explain as easy as I can. And of course, there are lots more lawyers who can explain much better. But I look at it in a more simplistic way. We must control our boundaries. So the last 4 remaining issues, which is Territorial Sea Act, continental shelf, the ownership of our hydrocarbons, oil and gas, and what is our quantum of the cash payment must be resolved so that all 21 issues which were identified by the MA63 becomes a complete picture. And then we amend the federal constitution. We repeal these laws. And I believe from there, with the right talents like you guys have, your colleagues, your friends, your family have, you will be able to change the course of our Sabah, as well as Sarawak and the rest. So I mentioned Sarawak. Did I mention Sarawak actually rejected the Territorial Sea Act?
Oh.
They quietly did it in the State Assembly during the late Adanat Sabah. Kelantan also rejected it quietly as well. So the 4 main gas producer and oil producer of our federation, only 2 have rejected it. Why has Sabah not rejected it? During our time, we were thinking of finalizing it all in total, in the federal government. That is why it was part and parcel of the 21 issues of the MA63 during our time. We would have repealed it, and then we would have defined our ownership of the hydrocarbon. Likewise, we would have controlled our continental shelf. The seabed of our continental shelf is the most important ground or asset that we have. Why? Vesting of the, remember I said, the vesting of the oil and gas were given to Petronas in 74. But legally speaking, if they were to break the ground or the seabed to touch the oil and gas, they need permission and license from the state. But it was bypassed through the emergency ordinance, where security was given, and we assume that all decision, because of the emergency, was centralized to the federal government through the Majlis Keselamatan Negara. So they decided on who can dive into our sea. They give license to Sipadan, people who dived in Sipadan or operated in Sipadan. They gave license to deep sea fishing, all federal decision. when in fact it should be ours. The beauty of the MA63, at least for my view, I stand corrected if someone counters it, was to control something that we can monetize, just like what Petronas has monetized, our oil and gas. But the unfortunate thing about that is policy can be withdrawn. Policies is not firm unless it is law. So all you guys want to be lawyers. So when you become lawyers, you know that if it is law, unless it is repealed, you cannot divert away from your obligation. So if the 21 issues were settled, the amendments were done on the federal constitution and what have you, it becomes federal obligation to give you all this. So this is why the MA63, if we look at it as a birth certificate, is your identity. But that identity was tampered with through the effluxion of time by legal changes, as well as centralizing all decisions to the federal government, when in fact it is your right to do so in your state.
So I understand that you have highlighted firstly our right as an autonomous entity. And in relation to that, you also used the word federalization, which I myself believe is a key term in the discussion of MA63 and our rights afforded by it. Now, taking a step back, to allow ourselves to analyze these implications, could you explain the origins of MA63 and more specifically, the special position that both Sabah and Sarawak should enjoy when we look back at the creation of what is known now as Malaysia?
Like I said, the MA63 would not have come about if not for the negotiations between the four nations. So the four nations must have come up, and I'm speculating again, must have come up in their minds at the time, the meeting of minds at the time, were to form an equal government. I run my state with the laws I have. You run your state with the laws you have. But we are all under a federal government. That means the federal government provides a security. We also contribute our taxation to them. But there are taxation that are kept by the state, like the Sabah sales tax and certain other fiscal management that we can do in Sabah. Lands are ours, etc., etc. So we have our own we have our own Sabah land ordinance, likewise the Sarawakians, and the federal having their national land code. So it was intended to be equal, but along the way, when Singapore was expelled, this inequality became very apparent when the seat numbers, distribution in government were greatly reduced towards Sabah and Sarawak, and all given to federal. So I don't know what happened then, but I think that this is the next step after the 21 issues are resolved. You need to talk about representation. Also, the intention was, and thankfully, with like I mentioned, Article 1 sub 3, you cannot change our boundary without state approval. So those are one of the protections that we have, among others. In the federal constitution, some of these rights were also enshrined, where native of Sabahs, likewise Sarawak, were given certain privileges. Decision where they are stateless cannot be touched by the federal government. Concurrent laws or matters that were shared between the federal and state, concurrent. The state list exists where our decisions are ours. So hence, our state civil service is not a federated civil service. We decide on our civil service. So the highest ranking member of the state civil service would be the state secretary of Sabah. But he's not obliged to listen to the federal state secretary. So the federal government, the state government, in as far as Sabah, Sarawak, and Semenanjung or Federation of Malaya government are concerned, is two separate civil services. So the intention of those who drafted the MA63, as well as all the laws relating to it, were to equalize us together. But because Singapore was expelled in 1965, probably we may have lost guide from them. We may have lost as well our confidence in running our federation together. Because Singapore was very strong. If you can recall, during Lee Kuan Yew's time, when he was expelled, or Singapore was expelled from the Federation of Malaya, Malaysia, he was the Prime Minister of Singapore. during 63, right up to 65, he was still the Prime Minister of Singapore, not the Chief Minister of Singapore. So these are the things that were intended. Probably in our case, we were, I don't know, again, I don't want to speculate why, but we were not sophisticated to call ourselves Chief Minister. Prime Minister. We called ourselves Chief Minister. Probably someone guided us that way, whether with intent or not. It probably should have been Prime Minister of North Borneo and Sarawak, since Singapore had a Prime Minister. But again, maybe the British also did some work there, which we were not very aware at the time. Because you can see how the Federation of Malaysia was formed after Sarawak gained its self-governance on the 22nd of July, 1963. Thereafter, Sabah on the 31st of August 1963. Only then, on the 16th September, were we able to form the Federation of Malaysia. So, to summarize and answer for your question, it was always intended, in my opinion as well as many others, to equalize themselves in equal stature. Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsula on an equal basis, where we had representation supposedly on a proportionate number to Parliament.
Mr. Darell, just a question to slightly deviate off what we have covered. I want to talk about freedom of religion. So we know recently that the current Chief Minister of Sabah, Datuk Sri Haji Noor, had stated that the Sabah government has rejected a proposed bill to control and restrict the propagation of non-Muslim religions. We also know that MA63 guarantees Sabah and Sarawak's cultural and religious distinctiveness from Peninsular Malaya, as justifies it as special treatment. But with this propagation of non-Muslim religions bill, does it threaten our freedom of religion in Sabah and Sarawak?
Okay, thank you for the question, Geoffrey. Now, the federal constitution also guarantees our freedom of religion of sort. Yeah, it does. It is stated and enshrined there. But did you know that in 1972 or 74, the state government of Sabah actually amended the state constitution to make Islam as its official religion? In 1972 or 74, I can't quite figure or remember the date. But in 1972 or 74, the Sabah state constitution, which was pre that amendment, did not have an official religion. It had no official religion in Sabah. Okay? So that was also part and parcel of the guarantees given in the MA63, that Sabah and Sarawak were able to enjoy freedom of religion, just as the federal constitution guaranteed, but there was no official religion. I believe Sarawak still does not have an official religion now.
Yes.
Okay, although they practice Islam as a religion of respect. So in Sabah, the then leaders, the then chief minister, amended the state constitution to make Islam as an official religion. Now, whether or not that is in breach of this MA63 or otherwise, of course, it is really up to the legal academics as well as lawyers to dwell and dispute on. But what I see is, albeit that they amended the state constitution, of course, freedom of religion is still guaranteed. But what we do see now, today, are efforts in certain political parties where they want to push for more stringent control over non-Muslims. There are efforts that I suspect, efforts to control religion, but a propagation by the non-Muslims over any other Muslims. But that is already provided for in the Constitution. If you read the federal Constitution well, so this is more stringent control. Now, I challenge and I put it to them: if you want to control non-Muslims from propagating their faith to Muslims, would it not be fair that similar law is also created for Muslims not to propagate to other religion? I mean, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If we keep on doing this polemic, we'll never solve a nation. So that is why we do not look at religion as our basis, nor race as our basis for as a political platform. It's our own fault. We gave this opportunity to these people to create such bill. We created a divide between ourselves. It's not the politicians who it was not only the politicians that divided us, but us ourselves divided ourselves. Why? If you realize this, guys, through all your friends, have you not realized something? Grenville, you're a Sino Kadazan. Elaine and Geoffrey, Dylan, Kadazan like Dylan. Did you not realize that our own community, the Kadazan community, started dividing itself by calling someone who is a Muslim Kadazan or Dusun as Melayu? Because we tend to associate the word Kadazan or Dusun as non-Muslim. Now, we have not even talked about the Sinos, who has names like, because those people with Siang, they don't even know, whether they are Kadazans or not, Dusuns or not. That's another subject matter that they will deal with in another time. But at most circumstance, most of the Kadazans, most of the Dusuns, most of the Muruts, I'm not too sure of the other natives, but they keep on talking KDM, which I don't use, KDM as Christians, non-Muslim. And this divide was caused by ourselves. So we gave these people weapon. We gave them the bullet to create such laws. And then we divide ourselves further by saying, there is this resentment over the changes that these people want to make. But we don't realize that we did it to ourselves. Of course, I get the people will whack me on this. I always seem to be whacked by other politicians, but this is an opinion that I hold dearly too, because we divide ourselves. So that is why I have never used in my political platform Kadazan or the KDM as my political stance. I am a Sabahan first. I've always made it clear. I did not choose my race. I was born as a Kadazan. I did not choose that. You were born as a Chinese. You were born as a Murut. You were born as a Bajau. You were born as a Suluk. You were born all this. But what you could choose is your allegiance. And your allegiance must be to Sabah first.
Yes.
So when you think Sabah first, it's not excluding all Malaysians, or Sarawakians. You have to think of the best for your state. But how do you achieve that if you're still divided by polemics of race and religion? Politicians tend to wear, in my case, what I notice amongst my community is they all seem to wear all the baju Kadazan, the beludu we call it, the sigar, the baju Kadazan and what have you, to describe themselves as a Kadazan. How much more Kadazan can you be? How much more Dusun can you be? You did not choose your race. You have to live that race and show the dignity of that race by accepting everyone together. In our case, accepting every Sabahan as the cause. In my case, Sabahan is my first cause. So as a race, some people joke with me and say, Darell, what race would you have wanted to be born as? I say, I cannot choose as well. But I've seen how good looking some of the Italian mixed with Kadazans are. So, but you do not choose your race. You did not choose who your parents were. So because you did not choose who your parents were, you have to live to make your parents proud, to make yourself proud, but foremost, think as a Sabahan first. Stop talking about race. Race is not our choice, but our state is our choice. Our allegiance to our state is our choice. So when people start using religion, I think we're going to go south.
In your vast experience as a minister going around the whole world, we can see here, as you mentioned already, there is a form of racial politics, especially when it comes to weaponizing our faith, our cultural identity. But is that something you think is more prevalent in Malaysia, or this kind of racial politics exist around the whole world?
Just a couple of months ago, before Biden won, you had an American president who did use these kind of things. So they had issues, and that's why he was replaced. Not only that, you have many of these politicians or certain extremists, regardless of what religion, uses this and weaponize it as the tool to convince people, to sway people, and to bring people into their side. So it is not endemic to Malaysia or Sabah or Sarawak, but it is becoming endemic today. Why? A lot of our politicians start using it in order to be relevant. And that is the danger. And this is where young people like yourself, especially soon to be lawyers, this is what we need to stop. People using their faith to gain support. Now let's localize it domestically. They'll always say, kita by ni. Have you realized that?
Yes,
Kita
yes.
by ni. And then when you start, okay, I get a lot of critics. I'm okay with it because they don't know whenever I get criticized, I improve. But a lot of people, when they get critiqued, they react. Okay. Now, some I notice I've criticized as well. Then I get an attack by saying, si Darell tidak fikir pasal orang kita. You see, this is the problem that we have. When we start defending people over a mishandling or a mistake that they did, when we criticize them, we tend to mitigate it by using race.
Yes.
I hope somebody realizes, I think you guys realize it, but I hope a lot more realizes this so that this become irrelevant. Then we look at merits, the ability of a person, how you bring malicious, merit-based community, society, and Sabah is to accept that when we fail, we must take responsibility and not mitigate it because I was criticized because I'm a Gagasan. I was criticized because I'm a Chinese. I was criticized because of this. Because those are the people who messes up our state. Semenanjung is another story. But let's talk about Sabah. In Sabah, when you go into your practice, do something that you, not only your parents can be proud of, but you are proud of. Don't negotiate it because of race. Don't negotiate it or claim your race to be first amongst the equals. Because we must all think Sabahan first. As much as the East Coast wanted to know the West Coast, we were always divided by lands. We were divided because of also our race. I don't know if any of you all, I think Dylan has traveled there, but I'm not sure Granville, Elaine, or Jeffrey. Have you ever traveled to the East Coast? Have you gone to Sempurna? Have you gone to Lahadatu? Have you gone to, I'm sure you've gone to Senakan, but have you all gone to other parts of the East Coast?
Oh, I have not had the chance to, but I would very much want to.
Yeah.
Exactly, Jeffrey. Yourself, Elaine?
Yeah, same. I hope to have the chance in the future to travel to the East Coast.
Granville?
I think the furthest would be just Tawau.
Okay, that's the East Coast. That's the East Coast. Okay, but you did not go probably to Sempurna. You probably did not go to Kunak, Lahadatu, etc., etc. Now, but whenever, I know Dylan more than all of you guys, whenever Dylan travels with our parents, they go everywhere, all over the world. So, yet in Sabah, we hardly even talk about going to Tawau, Kunak, Lahadatu, Senakan, and what have you. And even if we were to go, it would only be for business, or when you guys start practicing, it would be to represent your clients there. But we never dig and dwell into who are those people residing there and how different or how common are they with us. Now, on their side on the East Coast, they want to know us as well. And they've always looked at us as a central administrative center, which is the West Coast. All of us are from the West Coast. Jeffrey, Elaine, Dylan, Granville, myself are all from the West Coast. We tend to think that's the only island we live on. So that is where our dysphoria, or in this case, our dilemma, is within our own state, where we do not even understand each other, that we are all the same. We may be different in colors, but like Elaine, if you can remember, I said we did not choose our parents. Nor did we choose where we were born. Italian and Gagasan would have really looked nice lah. But anyway, si Dylan sudah starting, if I was like, lain sikit sa may rambut. But that's the thing. I'm trying to tell you, we have to love what God gave us, and that is our identity, and we have to bring it with a lot of dignity. So get to know more people from the East Coast. I face this politically even in my own area and wherever I go, where people whack me and say, hey, why are you working with this Baja? Why are you working with this person, that person, Tawi-Tawi, orang dari Tawi-Tawi, or PTI and whatever you. Because we tend to be so racialized, so divided in our own Sabah that we forget all this as Sabahans.
You've mentioned that the Sabah, we've amended our state constitution in the early years. And then subsequently, we have this bill to control and to restrict the propagation of non-Muslim religions. Wouldn't this actually contradict the Batu Sumpah that we have in Sabah right now? Because, the Batu Sumpah is not all the most Sabahans who hold it very dearly to their hearts and see it as like a very sacred thing to them.
The 1973 amendment, it was amended in 1973. Okay, to make Islam as the official religion of Sabah, whereas prior to that there was no official religion. Now the Batu Sumpah, it is only more known by the interior and part of the West Coast. But if you go to the East Coast, it has no effect on them. Maybe some who have read or found out. So I would look at it this way: the Batu Sumpah was created to affirm the position taken by the people of the interior at that time, because they were very much influenced. The political leaders at the time, can't quite recall their name, but they were not part of the formation. They were not in agreement with the formation in the beginning. That's where Dylan's late grandfather were. They were the political minds or political warlords during those times. The interior was not in favor of the formation of Malaysia. Okay, but somehow the West Coast side, through Fuad Stevens or Donald Stevens, started convincing them. And at the end, they did agree, but of course with a caveat. That caveat was, our land must be ours, religion must be free, and what have you. Okay, and true enough, the all these terms that were required by the leaders of the interior were enshrined by them or were placed by them in a Batu Sumpah. And if you look at it, yes, all these demands were also put into the constitution. That is why our Sabaland ordinance are ours. Okay, that is why religion was supposed to be free. Okay, but what happened in 1973? And like I said, although land is ours, our continental shelf is no longer ours. It's still, although it's ours, there's still legal lacuna over it, legal problems over it. So if you look at the Batu Sumpah, it's a promise or it's a demand, it's a caveat by the interior. The Batu Sumpah should not be politicized. It was a caveat. And that caveat was in place into law, the federal constitution.
So you mentioned that obviously there is a clear division between the west and east coast of Sabah. Do you think in the formation of Malaysia, there was proper consultation between all parties, both west and east part of Sabah?
Based on what I read, there was a consultation. But whether or not it was a complete consultation where the information were given properly and not influenced by political needs, I would say that the consultation was probably at best just an information as opposed to explaining it to people. So some people would support their political leader and follow their political leader and say, hey, ini betul. I mean, you can imagine how unsophisticated we were then. The information that we had were limited. It was like me waiting for my comic books every week when it was issued. Today, you can just go online and check out previous issues, right up to future issues, and all online. But at the time, they could only get information based on the indoctrination given, based on the radio that was given. If you realize, a lot of the dictation towards the formation of the Federation of Malaysia were all centralized in the West Coast. That is why the political leaders started going out of the West Coast into the East Coast, into the interior, influencing them. I doubt there was that kind of explanation to many others, but the rest followed because they believed in their political leaders.
Do you believe that if Sabah or North Borneo at the time were more politically sophisticated or more united in a sense, do you think it would have been a different agreement of terms for Sabah?
I would look at Singapore this way, as one of the proponents who encouraged us to be part of the federation, to form the federation. So Lee Kuan Yew, at the time, the late Lee Kuan Yew, must have encouraged our political leaders, given an idea, given a vision, what the federation will entail. So had we been more politically sophisticated, had we been more legally sound at the time, had the British not wanted to just throw us out, okay, they kept Brunei for that matter, if you remember, till 1980s. So had they were not in a rush where the treasury bill in the United Kingdom was at stake because of all the colonies, so they wanted to decolonize, I think the results would have been different. We would not have been part of the Federation of Malaysia. Because you can see the closest to us, the initial negotiator included Brunei. And then subsequently, Brunei did not form part of the Federation because I guess they were smaller and the British probably thought, they needed more guidance. So yes, I would say the results would have been different. We would not have been part of the Federation of Malaysia. And I would have believed had the negotiation been done. Of course, hindsight is 2020, but when you are, would you have had that sophistication that you mentioned, or the technology, or the ideas, or the realms of law that we know today? We would not, and I can almost assure you, not been part of the Federation.
Darrell, just a question for you. We've spoken about like the lack of sophistication, the lack of awareness and whatnot. So, like, in your opinion, currently, do you think our education system touches enough on MA63, especially in our history books and whatnot? And if not, then how should we go about this?
Okay, I browsed through some of the books I saw at the bookstore prior to COVID, and I did ask a little bit. It seems that the mention of the MA63 is only a single page.
Yes,
that's what I was told. So you can't explain. Even politicians, right, have to keep on explaining their position, their political stance in order to convince you to vote for them. Ultimately, it ends up with one single piece of paper where you vote on them. But they had to explain before that. So how could you explain the whole entire formation based on a singular page? So I would have thought that the state government, and this was what, of course, again, plans, people will say you all talk only. That is why it is that the Ministry of Education of Sabah, as well as the Ministry of Health in Sabah. Okay? I'll explain quickly why, among others, why we set it. Are you aware that whenever there's a federal project, federal does our school, federal does our hospital, right? Okay? All the hospitals you've been to, unless it's a private hospital, all the government hospital you've been to, as well as government school that you've been to, are all federal projects. So it had become a norm throughout the fluctuation of time as well, that whenever the federal gives money, the state have to give title ownership of the building or the land to the federal government. So when we set up the education ministry, what we were working on, and this is part of the 17 issues that we resolved of the 21 issues, were that all these title deeds be reverted, not be given to federal, but be given to the state education and health ministry. So whenever the federal builds a hospital, whenever they build a school, it should go to Sabah. So why it relates to, basically what you asked. How we protect ourselves, how sophisticated we are is dependent on knowledge. So education is so important that we need to weaponize our people, build a mind to our people by giving them access not only to information which you already have through the internet, but which you have as a regime, as a regimented document. That would be, first, explaining the formation. Second, we have to skill ourselves in a different way. you can see the model. Again, I keep on referring to Singapore, but the model Singapore had is perfect. They, although it's not 100% perfect, but it's close to perfection. They were able to build skill-based students as well as academically based students who were trained with skills later on. So in our country, it has become more regimented, and access to education is also in disparity. You can see a lot of people living far, far away. I mean, in the interior, not many of them have nearby schools. I was told in Baluran, some of the schools are like a couple of hours away, and the students have to live nearby the schools. The parents have to find relatives, if not rent a room for the children just to get basic education. Don't go far. In Penampang itself, for how many years, the upper side of Moyong, right down to Pogunon, there was no secondary school. The closest school was the last closest school for them, secondary school. I'm talking about secondary school. They had a lot of primary school, way up to the upper Moyong. But at the lower Moyong was the closest secondary school. So people from the interior of Penampang, after finishing their primary 6, they had to go to the lower Moyong. The closest were St. Michael's, Bahang, SMK Limbanak, and of course KK High School at one time, and then Datuk Peter, Sekolah Datuk Peter. So these were the only secondary school given. Now I'm relating this to my own constituency, which you all are very aware of. Dylan has no problem to walk to that school, but another person will have to drive to that school, if not take a bus to that school, if not unable to go there unless you give them access. So that is access to education. So how do you solve it? In 2012, they launched a school in the Upper Moyong, Kipovo, okay, the new school. But after they lost the election, they just ignored it. As an opposition member, all I can do is demand. Ultimately, executive decision is theirs. I can demand till the kingdom comes, till I die. But ultimately, the executive decides. So when we became government, I tried to find out why. And I realized that the fundings were withdrawn. 2013 all the way to 2018, 5 years, they didn't do much, and the fundings were withdrawn. So I asked the cabinet, please approve this, and they subsequently reverted it back to the budget and the allocation. So that school is now being built after we lost the government, because the tender process takes a while as well. So after March, it was tendered, but it was part and parcel of what we did. Now that will not solve the problem as well. What I was trying to do was to make the schools closer to the Upper Moyong. But the intrinsic question that you have is whether our syllabus are correct. Now, if schools we cannot solve, the proximity of schools we cannot solve, the size of classroom we cannot solve, can you imagine the syllabus? Who's going to solve it? If you centralize it to Semenanjung, because the Semenanjung thinking is different. Although as much as they want to understand us, they will never embrace, in our case, the MA63, because they were not trained to think like we were, or just before this as well. And I admit, probably 12 years ago, I was only learning what MA63 was. So if people like me took that long to learn, can you imagine in Semenanjung, something they don't understand at all? So we need to change the syllabus, but it has to come from us. But between ourselves, and I go back to my own community, there is Kadazan, there is Dusun, there's Kadazan Dusun, there is this, there is that, there's Murut, there's Rungus, and what have you. And the common language cannot even be agreed upon. And I don't think we should do that, because we're not like China. China is different. Through the kingdoms, they finally resolve singular mode of language, the Hangyu Pinyin. Okay? But in the interiors of China, some of them still don't speak Mandarin as well, or in different tone or accent of utterance of the Mandarin. So ours, we have that problem. So that is why I keep on saying we learn our language through family, or like Geoffery does through YouTube,
Thank you.
But you have to learn our origin, which is ultimately our subject of discussion. Our birth certificate must be inoculated, must be indoctrinated into our mind so that we know where we belong, that we are Sabah first, that we will not be polemic, will not be polarizing, but we want to be encompassing. But first we solve ourselves as Sabahan.
Okay, Darrell, I would
Yes.
like to ask, like as an East Malaysian student studying in the West, I would
Yes.
like most of them, as you said, they have like a different ways of thinking, compared to us. So
Different
how-
way of life. Lah.
yeah, correct. So how do you propose we, educate them or like enlighten them? How do we properly represent Sabahans to them?
Okay. I like this because when I first entered Parliament, I thought that I should introduce my culture, my who I am. So I tried to speak. I spoke Kadazan in Parliament. So it did bring interest because suddenly someone started speaking Tamil in Parliament as well. So, so that was good. But you see, a lot of them have read about Sabah. They say, oh, Sabah is such a peaceful place. It can mix with people and what have you. You can have someone sitting in a non-halal shop from all different faiths, from all different cultures. Yeah, we have that. We have that description. But in order to sell Sabah, we have to solve our problem first, which is the divide between the East Coast, West Coast, and the interior. That is why we can never really assimilate as Sabahans, because a lot of them start thinking, when you say Sabahan, it seems to be equated only to certain communities, if you realize that. I don't know if you guys realize that. When someone says Sabahan, the first thing they see is Baju Kadazan. In their mind, And that is not a fact. A Sabahan is all these faces that we see now, coming from different birthrights, coming from different origins, but Sabahan. Now, to introduce Sabah, we must show them our dignity, how we deal with things, how we portray ourselves, how we look at Sabah, what we want people to think of Sabah. Not Sabah where one time, wherever you are from Sabah during the 70s or 80s, anak kayu balak. Not that anymore. We have to start building ourselves by creating talented Sabahan. I mean, just imagine that famous lady, my friend's daughter, I forgot her name, Jong Yi. She does the painting.
Red
She
Hong
does Red Hong Yi.
Yeah.
That's my wife's colleague's daughter. My ex-colleague's daughter. I saw her when she was growing. Look at how internationally she's recognized. But as a Malaysian. But for us in Sabah, orang Sabah. We get excited. So, and she is very Sabahan, that lady. Red Hong Yi is very Sabahan. She talks about Sabah so much. Now, when she sells Sabah, she's selling us. Just like you, when you interact with your friends in Peninsula, you're selling us, Elaine. The next Sabahan they meet, they respect, they love, they appreciate because you started it first. So now whenever Red Hong Yi does a thing, everybody will say there's so many talented Sabahan. So we show that we are so diverse, yet we think as a state, Sabahan first. We did not choose who we were born as, but we choose our allegiance, and our allegiance is our state. So how do you sell or introduce our state or make people like our state even more? Is to tell the truth about our state. Where there are shortcomings, we tell, but we correct them. We are correcting them. We cannot just say perfect in Sabah because we know it's not perfect. Elaine, I'm very sure, like you said, you have not gone to the East Coast. You don't even know how the how the Tidung lives. You don't even know how the Idaan lives. You don't even know the Sungai. You don't even know the Bajau Laut. I did not know all of this until I started traveling within the state. But I would know where the best Irish pub was. Dylan's father and I were in London. So we would know the best places to go. But how come in my own state, I don't know? And we would know the best burgers or, the best kebabs when we were in the UK. But how come I don't know the best sangyok man somewhere else, in Sandakan. But I did, of course, I know now where lah. You see, we have to start portraying ourselves as people of all colors. We start to show them that we are as intellectual as them. Mm-hmm. We start to appreciate how they are, so that they can, reciprocate by appreciating us as well. And the best way is to be yourself.
So to put it in a way, Daryl, we're basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're Sabahan first.
Yes, that is how we must think. Because even through the formation of Malaysia, we dealt of it as a North Borneo citizen. Mm. So we are not trying to divide ourselves in the Federation of Malaysia, but you must have that thought that we are Sabahans, they are Sarawakians, they are West Malaysian, but we form the federation. So when I work with a Sarawakian, when you work with a Sarawakian as well as West Malaysian, we're working as citizens of the Federation of Malaysia. But this is my place. As we close the gap, the divide between Sabahans, there will be also those doing the same with us. And there will be our spokesman. There will be our greatest ambassador to their relatives in Sarawak as well as Peninsula. When they talk about Sabah, they talk about Sabah as a place that is ideal, that they've assimilated to, that they've become. And we must think Sabahan not in a divided way between Sarawak and Peninsula, but in a unifying way. We have to think Sabahan in order to protect our borders, in order to protect our land, our dignity, and to protect the hegemonous society that we all chose not to have, but we are blessed with. Anybody coming to Sabah and sharing that same love for our state should be welcome as a Sabahan as well. That is why I always say we should introduce visa requirement entry by Sarawakians to Sabah, because they do the same to us. It's not a tit for tat situation, but it is to record the presence of people coming into Sabah. And we must have data of people coming to Sabah. It is not to discriminate Sarawakians who come, because you can say the same thing if you use that same word to discriminate Sabahans when they go to Sarawak. That they need visa entry, 90-day entry to Sarawak. But in Sabah, we must have the same, and then we give them multiple entry, because they have served Sabah, they give something to Sabah, they're part of Sabah, they have interest, and they've got lawful contribution to Sabah. So I think we must go that way if we want to define MA63. Because we are Sabahans, they are West Malaysians, and they are Sarawakians, but we are one unique nation.
Going into that, the idea that we should be united, but then there's still a language barrier, which I feel like is still something that hinders us from fully being assimilated together. So how do you think we can bridge that gap, especially with like language and communication?
First, I don't think we should dictate that it must be a certain language only for us to have a medium of communication in our state. But I would think, because the science requires it, the future requires it, that we should use English as our mode of communication, that we should encourage our students to learn English, that we should bring English as not a mode of unification, but as a mode for future communication. Because eventually, regardless what you do, whether you come from a local university right up to a foreign university, in the job market, the reality is you need to speak English. China, just imagine that. Everybody has different dialects. They found a singular communication language, Mandarin, but did you realize there are more English spoken today than anywhere else? They have dedicated English channels. I watch CGTN. It's all in English. Before that, there was CCTV, I think. The Chinese made us all learn somehow Mandarin. most of you all can speak basic Mandarin or conversant in Mandarin. But while the Chinese was introducing Mandarin to all of us, they were learning English. So the Chinese grasped the language of the world. Singapore, the official language in Singapore is Bahasa Malaysia. Yet they speak English. Yet they make English as a first subject for a lot of them. But the official language, national language, is Bahasa. Their national anthem is in Bahasa. So language should be a form of identity in a sense of origin. But we should strive to have a common language medium for us so that we can communicate.
I just want to ask, because we are all law students here and our audience are law
Yes.
students. So what do you believe as law students? What laws or what acts do you believe are very important for us to fully understand, for us to be able to advocate for issues such as the MA63?
The Constitution, you read about the intergovernmental report that led to the formation of Malaysia. Compare the differences in our judiciary. Today, they made a landmark decision, arbitration, if you read it in the paper. So the High Court of Sabah and Sarawak is distinct from the High Court of Malaya. In fact, to me, the Chief Judge of Sabah and Sarawak, to me personally, should always be the next Chief Justice of Malaya or the Federation. So you need to know the differences between the states, the laws that we have, and in the case of Sabah, learn and protect our land ordinance, learn and protect our local government ordinance, learn and protect our health ordinances, learn and protect the state constitution of Sabah. Correct all this. You need to know all this. But when you go to commerce, you still need to know Contracts Act. You still need to know other federal acts. Those are the concurrent or federal lists. So you need to know them because it's applied here. But there was at one time, Sabah's appeal was through the Privy Council. But of course, they abolished the Privy Council in the UK. So there was one time even that, the uniqueness of our state. So much so that we are unique that in order to enter the Sabah bar, to be admitted to the Sabah or roles of advocates in Sabah, you need to have Sabah connection. Your chambering in Sabah is longer than West Malaysia. Not that it makes any difference as a lawyer, but what makes a difference is our laws are distinct and they make money to us. So we need to have and to know our laws in Sabah. In fact, I would have thought, and of course I'm not aware of the actual rules of it, but the native laws that we have in Sabah, regardless of what origin you are from, we all should try and build a jurisprudence over it, in fact, codified laws of it, so that we can then create something distinct also from Peninsula. It is only in Sabah and Sarawak that you have our own native laws. And personally, I don't think it must only be done by natives or natives right of appearance in native courts. It should be any Sabahans, because ultimately the client is a native. But the lawyers, the legal minds doing and improving native laws need not be a native. Because I think you must have a very live lawyers who are experts, have become experts in so many fields, so many different subjects of practice. That is why there are also non-Muslims who became Sharia law lawyers, but they cannot appear. So why do they restrict it? I would have thought the legal mind does not choose, or legal expertise does not choose your race, because each legal expert may come in different colors and in different creed. So when they represent their client, they represent their client not because they are Muslim or non-Muslim or native or non-natives, but they represent their client because of the law. So learn as much as you can about the law, and never lose your sales. You navigate yourself to do the best you can do in law. There are many friends I know who did very well in law. Some friends I know struggled to do well in law, but ultimately they're all lawyers and they all hold one thing: Sabah's roles of advocates. So when you represent anyone else outside of Sabah, when you go and deal with lawyers outside of Sabah, and that is why I said, you represent Sabah. Sabahan lawyers can be trusted. Sabahan lawyers have dignity, and they have style. Swag.
I agree with you. On that one.
Geoffrey, I just realized you're wearing like Uncle Roger.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man.
Before this I was frying rice downstairs.
No wonder.
Yeah. All right. So I noticed, Darrell, you have a very interesting T-shirt on, and it resonates to our segment, our final segment today. That is, we on this show we always ask our special guests or any guests what their favorite things are, and on this episode we're gonna ask you what is your favorite TV series and also your favorite Malaysian food. So could you enlighten us?
Okay. My favorite TV series, I have many, but I am definitely stuck to currently to two. The Star Trek series, of course. Now it's the bad robots lah. Okay, the bad guys, and then of course Marvels. The What If is the latest one that I've been looking at.
An infinite number of what ifs.
Have you seen that? The What
Yes.
If in the alternate of. That's amazing. Episode 5 now. So Marvel series definitely. If Dylan says he's in a Marvel buff, I even looked at one of the series where one of the one of the movies that was really not in line with Marvel. The Hulk, the first Hulk.
Mm.
So, the Incredible Hulk.
Follow the chronology, the Incredible Hulk. So,
follow that in What If.
So basically, those are the things that gives you a lot of ideas. I like the ideas given there, and Marvel and the Star Trek series. But on the comedic side, definitely Friends lah. How you doing?
Right.
Hey, how you doing?
Joey does not spread food.
What about your favorite Malaysian food?
Favorite Malaysian food? For some reason, I love the nasi lemak. I don't know why, and there's proof in the pudding lah. So I love the nasi lemak, but only certain type of nasi lemak, not all nasi lemak. My friend always tells me this: some of these nasi lemak you introduce to us sadap, tapi ada gantung. You know what's the gantung?
What is it?
Sebab sikit saja dia punya dia punya kacang dan itu bilis. And then you want to have the second bite again, second pack again. So there's some nasi lemak that makes you go for the second serving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think nasi lemak is amazing. Of course, traditional food. I grew up with a lot of other traditional food which I cannot do without. Of course, it's not healthy now for me. They say basungan is definitely my favorite fish, and you can eat with rice. This is something I introduced to a lot of friends, and if you're into this, bambangan together with sardine cooked with ketchup and onions.
Ooh.
And hot rice. Try that.
I can imagine it.
Hot beef, so. Tapun.
What about you, Dylan?
Okay, my favorite TV series. I mean, at the moment, similar to Darrell, I'm watching What If, and I think I just watched the episode with zombies.
Episode 5. The zombies.
Zombies.
Yeah, I found that that's quite interesting because you see other characters that are not so prevalent in the series, like the Wasp, but you see how big her impact actually is if she does not do a few things. Besides that, I also love the new shows like Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Okay.
The Marvel series.
Yeah, Marvel.
And Hawkeye is coming out soon. Next month.
Yeah. As for favorite Malaysian food, I know when I was in the UK, all I could think about, especially when I wanted to go back to Sabah, was tuaran mi. I don't know, something about tuaran mi
Tuaran
is
mi.
always like, at the core, like I really love tuaran mi. And I think there's a tuaran mi somewhere in Market 88. I can't tell you where, but
Yeah,
like,
which is quite nice. Yeah, quite nice. I tried it.
yeah, so tuaran mi lah for me. It's my favorite Malaysian food.
Okay. I'm just gonna put it out there. My favorite TV series is also What If currently.
An infinite number of what ifs.
Currently,
currently. I just finished binge watching it last night. I watched 5 episodes, one shot. Okay.
The first episode was good as well. The Captain America.
Captain
The lady. Yeah. What do you call
Captain
that?
Carter.
Captain
Peggy.
Carter. Yeah. Peggy Carter.
For comedy, my favorite has to be hands down The Office.
No, God!
The Office is really,
same.
really good.
It's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As for Malaysian food, I've just recently been craving this sangyup man.
Yummy.
Any sangyup man at Lintas is good. Very good to me.
Lintas, okay. Good.
Yeah. What about Elaine? What's your favorite TV series?
Yeah, Elaine.
Yeah, well, since everyone has already mentioned What If, I've also watched it, but I'm not up to date lah. But yeah, it's definitely really good. So for comedy, like I also like Friends, but I'm more of a How I Met Your Mother fan. Like I love that show a lot. Yeah, and I've watched it like many times lah. And also there's another
series. Very nice.
Yeah, there's another series called Sex Education.
Has anyone seen Jackson Harris?
And their newest
That's
season
a
is
new
coming
one.
out soon.
That's a new one.
Yeah, their newest
Second
season.
season.
Yeah, it's coming out, and it's very interesting because they have very different tropes, and they touch on a lot of more taboo topics. I feel so. It's like quite insightful as well. Like it educates us. And there's another like series called Fruits Basket. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it. Yeah, but it's actually recommended by my friend, and it's really good. It's an anime actually. Yeah, it's quite wholesome and it's really nice lah. Yeah, really like tear jerking. Yeah. So for Malaysian food, I was actually thinking of sangyup man as well.
That's yummy.
Yeah. I know, like.
So we all should go out for sangyup man, huh?
Yeah.
We should.
Dylan, arrange.
Yes, Darrell.
Arrange.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. What about Granville?
All right. So favorite TV series, I would definitely hands down The Office also.
No, God, please, no.
I love it. This is my second time watching the whole series again.
Okay.
Another one would be, I don't know if any one of you heard of this before, but it's called Shark Tank.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So this is
good. Season 20 plus.
I'm going. Yeah. So I like because it gives me some innovation, some thinking to think about. Yeah. So for favorite food, I would have to say mee Beaufort.
Yummy.
Mee Beaufort sama Wongkok punya dim sum lah. Mee Beaufort Wongkok
Have you
punya
tried
dim sum.
ada dim sum baru tu?
Dekat the cemetery kah?
Hongten, ya.
Ya. Boleh
Taman
juga.
Dixon.
Ada fight juga.
Ada fight.
Ya.
More. By the way,
I feel like
ever watched Power?
People come here and become whoever they want to be.
POWER. Of course, it's directed by my favorite rapper, 50 Cent. So there were 5 seasons of Power, and then there's Power Book 2. Of course, it's a spin-off, Power Book 2, and then there's another prequel of it, of Power, called Kanan. You love that show.
I'll write it down. Last question I have for Darrell. What are your words of encouragement for any law students, particularly in Sabah right now?
Be the best that you can in your field, because each one of you all will go into different field of practice. It's either you go into actual legal practice, where you will have conveyancing, litigation, new eras like dispute resolution, through arbitration or through alternate dispute resolution kind of practice. Some of you will go into other fields, banking, corporate sector, and what have you. So the best advice I think I would love to get is first, never ever give up in anything that you do, because ultimately you'll find your sail. You'll find where you go to. We may not be so good in a specific thing that we want, but we can always, as lawyers, we can always choose another regime or another field that we can do. So law is so versatile, as Dylan mentioned, Elaine as well. It's so versatile that it is all about you. Never ever think that you are an island. Always remember that everyone is contiguous. You need everyone. The ecosystem is people that you will be working with and will be working with you. So learn skills every other day. And make one thing clear. You will always be caught if you cheat on your practice. You'll always be caught if you lie on your practice. The beautiful thing about law is the ethics. And you will meet, and I put it clearly, you'll meet lawyers who are unethical. I have met some in my life, probably one or two, but out of the thousands, there's only one or two. So you cannot start wrong. And where you face problems, work it out, solve it, and never ever give up.
Thank you very much for your words of encouragement, Darell. Well, that's all the time we have, folks. Thank you for listening to Alibi the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this very, very special episode, and we look forward to talking about more relatable and relevant Sabahan law student topics. I'm your host, Geoffery. Special thanks to our guest, YB Datuk Darell Leiking, on this episode. If you haven't checked out our previous episode on whether law school is depressing, please do. Subscribe to us and stay updated on all our latest content. See you in the next episode. Thank you.
Katodan. Thank you, guys.
Katodan.
Say.
Sorry now that I'm a little late. I apologize that you had to wait. It totally slipped my mind. I lost all my sense of time. So buy me that drink and just let me think, and I'll tell you the reasons why.